My name is Michael Walker, and this is my presentation on how to cook tonkatsu. In high school, I worked for a Japanese restaurant. It wasn't a great job, but I got to do something I love to cook. I love to do cooking. It was my first time working in a restaurant, so they put me on a fryer, a good beginner job. Most nights I cook two popular Japanese dishes: tonkatsu, a fried pork cutlet, and tempura. I currently live in Japan with my wife of 3 years, and I'm taking full advantage of the fact that I live in this wonderful country and learning to make so many good Japanese dishes. Today, I'll teach you to make one of my favorites, tonkatsu. Let's look at what it takes to make a proper tonkatsu. First, we need pork cutlets. Next, salt and pepper, half a cup to a cup of rice, 1 egg, tonkatsu sauce, extra virgin olive oil or vegetable oil, panko breadcrumbs, and flour. Now, let's move on to preparing the first part, the rice. Prepare half of a cup to a cup of rice, depending on how many people you are feeding. This is a good amount for about 1 to 2 people. You can, of course, double the rice, but remember, if you double the rice, double the water. I prefer to wash my rice in a bowl, but you can use a colander if you prefer. To properly wash rice, you need to use lukewarm water and fill the water just above the rice. When it's filled with water, take your hand and swirl the rice to get the dirt and the grime off of it. Repeat this action 5 to 10 times until the rice water is mostly clear. I say mostly clear because you don't want the rice to lose all of its natural flavoring, and that can happen if you overwork the rice by doing this process too many times. After the rice is washed and drained, put it in your pot. It is best to place the rice in the pot first and then the water second, so that as you pour the water into the pot, the rice kernels separate and the rice will cook more properly. And of course, if you're using ready-made rice, you don't need to do this step. Let's move on to the egg. The egg is a key component to this dish. It binds the flour and the panko together, and it really helps the dish stand out. Most people when frying foods mix the egg a couple of times and they think it's fine. This is a huge mistake because the egg whites and the yolks don't have time to bind together and really help solidify the egg mixture. So to do this, you need to beat the egg about 45 seconds to about a minute. Let's move on to the pork. If you can't find a pork cutlet, you can use a pork chop or chicken breast if you don't eat pork. Pound the pork or the chicken to about 1/4 of an inch to 1 inch thick. Any thicker than that, and you stand a chance to burn the breading when you get it on there. Now, let's move to flouring the pork cutlet. When I do this, I put the pork cutlet directly onto the flour and mash it down to try to get as much flour all to cover the complete surface as I can. I flip it over and I repeat the process again. I do it on the same side as I did on the first, and then I flip it over and do it one more time. Now, onto the egg mixture. I do the same thing I did with the flour as with the egg mixture, making sure it covers the entire surface, and then I flip it over and I do it on the other side. The key, though, and what people forget sometimes, is to go around the edge of the cutlet as well. Finally, we move on to the panko breadcrumbs. Do the same thing that you did with the egg and the flour, making sure you cover all of the surface with panko, flipping over, and then doing it one more time. This really helps increase the crispiness of the tonkatsu and makes for a really delicious, amazing tonkatsu. Now let's move on to pouring your oil into the pot. If your pan is really wide, you need to add a little bit extra oil. But if your pan is really small, you need to use a little less. Cut on the eye to medium-low, and after 30 seconds, cut it up to medium heat. After another 30 seconds, you can test the oil by dropping a little bit of flour, and if it sizzles on contact, your oil is hot enough. Once the oil is hot enough, use tongs to put the cutlet into the pan and cooking for about 1 minute to 3 minutes, and flipping over and doing the other side, obviously. But before you flip, cut the heat down to low. You'll know it's time to turn the cutlet over when it's a nice golden brown. After you flip it over, cut the heat back up and continue to cook it for about another minute and 15 seconds or 2 minutes and 45 seconds. You need to do a little bit less because it cooks a little bit faster the second time because the oil is heated up. Now, after this, place it on a cooling rack so that the bottom of the tonkatsu doesn't saturate in its own oil. You really want the natural air to start crisping the the breading up so that you can get a nice crispy breading, and so it tastes a little bit better. You need to let it sit for about 2 to 5 minutes. After your tonkatsu has had enough time to sit, you need to cut it. Pull out your cutting board and start chopping. You want the pieces to be about 1/4 of an inch thick. Any thicker than that, and it gets a little too hard to eat. And instead of having good small bites, you get big chunky bites, and that's not very good or delicious. Now let's move on to plating. I stick to using either I put the rice on the top of the plate or I put it in the middle of the plate. It's a matter of preference. You can do whatever you want. I prefer to do it in the middle of the plate because I like my tonkatsu to sit on top so that the rice drips down, so that the tonkatsu sauce drips down into the rice. And you get a good mixture. Now, after you get the cutlet on there, it's time to put the tonkatsu sauce on, the best part of the tonkatsu. You need to get it a good even spread so that it covers all of the bites and so that every bite has that delicious, amazing barbecue-esque flavor. I love it. It's so good. Now, after all of this hard work, you messed up your house, there's flour everywhere, there's oil all over your countertop. You finally get a dig in. It's a delicious first bite. Enjoy every bit of it. Now, I've done cooking for a couple of years, and I really enjoy cooking for my friends, my family, and those close to me because it makes me feel good when they're smiling and they're telling me how good my food makes them feel. Thank you for listening. This has been Michael Walker and How to Cook Tonkatsu.